Good evening, everyone. I am Allison McFarland. I'm the director of the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs here at UBC. And it's my real pleasure this evening to welcome you all to the fourth event in the Phil Lind Initiative Speaker Series. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're gathered here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Musqueam peoples. For countless generations, these lands have been a place of learning, connection, and stewardship. We're very thankful for the opportunity to come here and continue the traditions of sharing knowledge and ideas. I also want to take a moment to recognize the late Phil Lind, whose vision and generosity made tonight's event possible, and to acknowledge his family for their ongoing support. Phil believed deeply in the power of public discourse, the value of open debate, and the importance of having students, our future, be part of these conversations. This evening, we're honored to have members of Phil's family and close friends with us, and we thank you for joining us. The theme of this year's series is what it means to be American, navigating identity in a changing nation. And change the United States has. In the past 52 days since President Trump was inaugurated, he's threatened to redraw the US-Canada border, eject us from Five Eyes intelligence sharing community, and annex Canada through economic force. While this series was designed to explore the shifting contours of American identity in a time of political upheaval, it's also forcing us to figure out what it means to be Canadian in a world where the US is no longer our closest ally. Through tonight's conversation, as well as our next event with Raven Chacon on March 27th, I hope we can shed some light on what's happening south of the border and what that means for us here at home. With that, let's turn to a few logistical details for tonight. We're going to be taking audience questions in the latter half of the event through Slido. You can submit a question or upvote a question you like by going to slido.com and entering the event code hashtag LIND25, so all caps LIND25. And lastly, a friendly reminder to silence your phones. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, Shad. Shad's a Rwandan-Canadian rapper with 7 full-length albums since his debut in 2005. He won the Juno Award for Rap Recording of the Year in 2011, and 5 of his albums have been shortlisted for the prestigious Polaris Music Prize for the Canadian Album of the Year. As a presenter, Shad has hosted the CBC radio show Q and is host of Netflix's Peabody Award-winning documentary series, Hip Hop Evolution. We were honored to have Shad join us last year to moderate a conversation with Suleika Jawad and John Batiste. And like our esteemed moderator, Ziwe has a truly impressive and diverse list of credits. A positively fearless comedian, writer, and actress, Ziwe has taken the internet by storm and redefined the boundaries of satire through shows such as Baited with Ziwe, as well as an eponymous show on Showtime. She's also co-hosted the Hysteria podcast and served as a writer for Stephen Colbert, as well as The New Yorker. She's been featured in Forbes magazine Top 30 Under 30 in entertainment, as well as their top creators list. Perhaps the most impressive achievement of them all, my daughter is a fan. So please join me in welcoming Ziwe and Shad.
Welcome to Vancouver. It's your first time here.
Thank you. What a beautiful, beautiful city on a hill. I am familiar with Vancouver, of course, because of the Twilight series, and it did not disappoint. I love it.
Sweet. There's so much I want to get into with your work.
Yes.
But first, I read that you have a dog named Celine Dion.
I do have a dog named Celine Dion. Thank you. He is a male, or he's gender nonconforming.
So as a Canadian, I have to ask you about that first. That's the law here. Kendrick versus Drake versus Celine.
Ooh. It's hard to pick between so many different figures. I think I pick my dog. He's so cute.
Awesome. Okay. So since we're on campus here, there's many students here in the audience. I thought that we could start in terms of your work with when you were a student at
Yes.
Northwestern,
Yes.
and you got to intern for Comedy Central, including on Colbert.
Yes.
Could you take, especially for the students here, take us back to what that felt like? What memories do you have of being a younger person in that environment? Do you remember anything from the first days or weeks that stand out for you?
Of course, I still identify as a young person, to be clear. I am Gen Alpha. But I famously interned at Comedy Central. I saw that Donald Glover, who is a big hero of mine, did this rotational program called the Rock Turns. And I decided to follow in his footsteps and do the same thing. And it was a rotational program where you spent 2 weeks at The Daily Show, 2 weeks at Colbert Report, and then marketing and all the other departments at Comedy Central. I found it really exciting because I was raised by Nigerian immigrants who have the idea that you can either be a lawyer, an accountant, or a doctor, or you're a loser. And so that was the first time I ever realized that a job in the arts paid, that it was possible, that it was accessible. I was a very chatty intern, so I was lucky enough to get a joke on Colbert Report. And so suddenly this beautiful and brilliant world that I never imagined I could be a part of was really within my reach. And that experience helped me understand that I could be a professional creative.
Did you learn anything in that internship about your own voice as an artist, as a comedian?
That's a great question. I learned that I have an attraction to satire and critique of politics and social commentary, which I don't know if it's the best thing for my career. I wish I was one of those people that could be like, oh, my wife, she doesn't park the car or whatever. I wish I had a Ray Romano sensibility, but I am who I am, and so I appreciate the fact that I am attracted to news. Yeah.
The Onion, serious comedy, satirical comedy. The Onion was another early gig for you. And I think it's so interesting, Colbert, The Onion, these are real institutions when it comes to comedy and satire in America. You're still a younger person, but I was hoping you could reflect a little bit on what those institutions sort of meant then and what they mean now as things have changed in America. If you have thoughts on that.
Totally. I mean, that's such a hard question because the more things change, the more they stay the same. I remember, at least the day I was interning at Colbert, it was the same week as Edward Snowden had fled the country. It was the same week as Trayvon Martin had been, George Zimmerman was tried for the murder of Trayvon Martin, and he was found not guilty. So that was obviously a politically tense moment in American history that somehow has repeated itself in a way that seems that we have not learned anything at all. So to answer your question, nothing has changed. If anything, I feel like the lessons I learned from that time in history are still applicable today, for better or for worse. For worse, unequivocally.
Just going back for a second, how did it feel to get a joke on Colbert during an internship?
It felt great. I was like, yippee, wow. And then I realized that there was so much work to be done between chatting and getting a joke on a show to actually being a working professional who can hit joke lines on demand. That is a skill that takes a lot of time. And that's something that I learned from working at The Onion, was to be able to deliver. So I freelanced at The Onion, and so we got paid, I think, $30 per joke. And woo, when I tell you, there were weeks I did not eat, and so you learn very quickly, like, I need to sell a joke or I am going to starve.
So you write. We've been talking about your writing experience. You write. You act.
Yes.
You sing.
Yes.
Is there a kind of succinct way you conceive of yourself as an artist? Like, how do you think of yourself as an artist?
Satirist. For sure. I'm attracted to undermining society. I am a little chaos agent. I don't know why. I wish I could tell you why I have this perverse attraction to pointing out the holes in the world. Maybe because I was raised by such strict Nigerian parents that I feel the need to say, I don't know if that's true all the time, but I'm very annoying in that way. And so I would put my entire work under that umbrella.
Satire.
Yes.
My family's from Rwanda. So I was also curious in terms of your background. Like, I always feel like I grew up here, but I always feel like I've always had a bit of a different perspective on Canadian society, just hearing my parents' view of things. And I was curious if there's things that stand out for you in terms of a different perspective on America, just hearing about some of your parents' experiences.
Absolutely. I could go on and on and on. But I think the biggest impact to having parents from Nigeria was understanding that their worldview is neither law, and nor was my worldview, nor is anyone else's, right? But having a really strong POV that differs from the world. So I grew up in a deeply Christian household that had very strong rules around gender. And once I left that household at 14 years old, I realized that those were not the rules. And having respect for my parents, but realizing that their way of life is not mine, that really helped me understand, like, people have different POVs, and rather than saying you're wrong and I'm right, which is often the case, it is better to listen and see where we can sort of meet in the middle.
I read in an interview you think of your evolution as an artist as sort of progressing almost backwards to the Ziwe you were when you were 5, 6, 7 years old.
Totally.
I'm curious, who was that? How would you describe the Ziwe at 6 years old in terms of an artist, a creative person? What did you find funny when you were 6?
What's so odd is when I was 6 years old, I wanted to be president. I wanted to be the first black president, and then obviously Obama beat me. So it's so interesting that I find myself sort of fixated on American politics. I also wanted to be a pop star. And again, you find that, with my hit single, Stop Being Poor, you find that, that curiosity sort of it's emanating from my work. So I think that I stay true to that child in her desire for world domination. She was power hungry and she needs help.
I want to just go back to a question I just asked a moment ago, just in terms of your parents' perspective. Like, I think about my parents grew up in all over East Africa, and they grew up in the 70s under Idi Amin. And so I actually love picking their brain these days about our good friend Trump to the south, because they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that. And I get this insight from them. I'm just curious about this particular political climate, if there's anything that you glean from their experiences.
For me, the biggest lesson I've taken from their political experiences fleeing a civil war in Nigeria, the Biafra War, was to survive.
Like, do what you got to do to survive.
I mean, survive, live. That they went through a lot, but their trauma lives with them, and it lives with me. Even the stories they haven't repeated, you can feel it in the air whenever they sort of look back into the distance and disassociate about their childhood. But they survived.
Yeah, survival is
a lot
virtue,
of people didn't,
sure.
though, but
Exactly.
they did.
Okay, I'm sure there's many fans here of your baited interviews, so I want to ask you about that. First off, just for background, yeah, you can cheer for that. Why not? First off, just for background, where did the idea for that series come from?
People always ask me that. The truth is, it comes from strangers approaching me and saying really wacky stuff. And so I remember, particularly in high school, my peer approached me, a young person who is my peer, approached me, and she sort of unprompted was like, I had a black nanny, and I was like, why would you say that? Like, we are at a Wendy's. And so, if you can imagine, for some strange reason, my presence evokes confession. And I have used that trauma and pulled profit out of it. But thank you to Capital. It's like the Hunger Games. Yeah, but it has come from like literal personal experience of people just saying really strange things to me, and then turning those awkward encounters where I'm like, did anyone see that exchange? No? And putting it on screen into a really, really compelling conversation with a George Santos type.
I'm sure you also get asked this a lot, but why do people want to do it? Why do people want to put themselves in that position?
I get that question a lot, as if I hogtie these people and, like have a knife to their throat as I'm asking them questions. I'm a sweet darling, and they are delighted to hang out with me. I think that why? I can't speak for my guests. Every single person, from Phoebe Bridgers to Fran Lebowitz to Chet Hanks to George Santos, they all have different reasons for wanting to do these interviews. Some of them have really great senses of humor. Some of them like my work. Some of them are looking for the really sticky virality that comes with these clips. I can't say why, but they are all consenting adults. And I don't see them as a villain or as a victim. I see them as my scene partners. Like, I could not create this really compelling, original art without their participation. So I have nothing but celebration for them. Icons, all of them.
How much of the art is in the dialogue, and how much of the art is in the editing for you?
Ooh, 50-50. But the edit comes from the dialogue. Like, I don't try to create anything that's not there. So, for example, I interviewed this iconic comedian, Rosebud Baker, 2 days ago. And what was really compelling about her is, firstly, she is the granddaughter of like the Secretary of Treasury of the United States under, I want to say, Reagan. Under Reagan, and George W. Bush's chief of staff, I want to say, or George Bush's chief of staff. Long story short is that she and I were talking about Obama, and she spoke about how she would vote for him for a third term. And in the edit, you hear the theme of Get Out play as I look directly to camera as this beautiful blonde woman is saying she would vote for Obama for a third term, right? So, again, there's editorial in what is included in the edit, but obviously the skeleton is there in the conversation. So it really is to just emphasize our dialogue.
Any personal favorite funny moments from those interviews?
I don't know. Everything is camp. I cannot pick a funny moment. Obviously, George Santos lives in my heart. But in my heart is also Chet Hanks, as well as Stacey Abrams, as well as Andrew Yang. They all take up parts of my heart that I cut up each time I do a new interview. So it's hard to decide.
Yeah. Chet Hanks, I realized at a certain point when I was watching that one that I was covering my face. Like, it slowly creeped up, and I could barely stand to watch it.
He's a star, and we went to college together. Fun fact. I've known him since I was 18. I met him on my first day of school. Fun fact. And look at us now.
Any surprises in terms of ways that series has struck a chord that surprised you?
I mean, the biggest surprises are what questions stick. So, for example, when I was doing the Instagram Live videos with Allison Roman and Rose McGowan, throwback, right? This was during the pandemic. I would interview people virtually on Instagram Live. And I had a list of questions, and for some reason, the question, how many black friends do you have, was the one that was the most memorable, but I had no idea that would stick. Versus when I interviewed Rosebud Baker 2 days ago, I posted a clip, not thinking anything of it, where I asked if she could state for the record her race and gender. And this is a clip that has 7 million views, and I don't understand why, but I think that's part of the intrigue around the interviews, is that there's so much space and quietness that it leaves room for the audience to project their own opinions and POV onto the subjects. So it's not just an interview between me and my guests. It is between me, my guest, and the third person, the viewer.
I want to ask you a bit about your book, Black Friends.
Yes.
Lot that I loved in that book. There was one moment, anecdote that stood out for me. You're talking about being asked to do something during Black History Month, which we all know about. And
it's my busiest month.
It's a busy month.
Not this year, eek.
And yeah. But you were asked, I thought it was a really poignant story. You were asked to highlight a hero of yours, and you picked Ida B. Wells.
Yes.
And specifically, you wanted to mention how through data and reporting, she helped fight lynchings.
Yeah.
Eradicate lynchings. And in this scenario, the organization were like, thank you, but could you do something with no lynchings, right? Because they wanted it to be all neat and sanitized, and it's a scenario that's familiar to many of us. But it made me curious if you've ever run into almost the reverse situation as well, of like being asked to come into a space to comment really seriously about racial issues or do some kind of trauma, porn or something like that, and you just want to be yourself, a comedian, a fun person.
I rarely get asked to do porn. However, However, there are instances I'll say with like press, we'll do press kits, and they'll be like, the question will somehow come to like, tell us about an incident where you experienced racism. Boo, bummer, tomato, tomato, So I find those to be sort of the most uncomfortable because especially if you have ever experienced a racism, sort of that nothing comes to mind when someone asks. It's just like, my life flashes before my eyes. It's like it's very That's So Raven like. So in those instances, I usually am just like, I cannot offer like a nice, adorable, cute little soundbite for you in which I am, the fabric of my being has been traumatized.
Yeah. You summed up a lot of people's experience with that answer. Thank you. Yeah. So many laugh out loud moments for me within the book.
Oh, thank you.
Were things that you wrote, but also one thing that you didn't write that made me laugh very hard, which was a tweet from the candy snack company Gushers. Presumably in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, they tweeted, I want to read this so that I get it right.
Please.
Gushers would not be Gushers without the Black community and your voices. We're working with @Fruit by the Foot on creating space to amplify that. We see you, we stand with you. So, my question for you is, in your professional opinion, what's funnier? The tweet itself, or imagining that tweet being prepared in the boardroom? And really, what's, in your professional opinion, what's funny?
What's so funny is that you asked that in the climate of 2025, and I have to say, yum, I love Gushers. Bring me back to when they were apologizing on Notes apps, because, dog, it is tough out here. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when those tweets and those apologies and where I remember getting spammed with emails of people apologizing for racism. I am nostalgic. Gosh, remember when Nancy Pelosi wore that kente cloth? Bring me back. I'll take back every joke I ever had about brown Band-Aids to go back to when people were sorry about that stuff.
Shirt was from her collection. I swear.
Like, I wish I could see Chuck Schumer with box braids. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, we had it. We didn't know how good we had it.
Yes.
Gushers apologizes for racism.
Let's go back.
Gosh.
Your talk show, you were not just the host, you were also the executive producer. It's amazing. What was the best thing about running your own show?
The best thing? It's hard, and really, it's a labor of love. The best part about running my own show is it lives and dies with me. So that's the hardest thing, is that you are responsible for what you create. But even it's a team effort, which is really makes it possible, that there are so many different cooks in the kitchen to help you collaborate and realize your dream. But ultimately, my success came from having a really strong POV because it was my name. Yeah.
I read your interview in the Georgia Straight today, and you talked about the importance of POV, of perspective. Could you, I thought you had a really great idea about a college course that develops that. Could you share a little bit about that?
Well, if y'all are looking to hire me, I would love to teach a college course on perspective. I think that perspective is the most important thing as an artist, as a writer, to have. Where are you coming from? Obviously, you want to be unbiased, but you still have to understand what is your entry point into the story. And I think that that is essential. I think that that is what differentiates me from my young peers.
In terms of POV, could you talk about your imprint on that show, especially the aesthetics?
The shows, my imprint on the show.
Especially the look of it.
It was pink and hyper pop culture and hyper like Barbie core, Legally Blonde core, 80s like business suits. Why? I think because my perspective is that late night is such a male-driven space that for a woman to come in, a young woman at that, to come in, I thought it would be really bombastic to embrace my sexuality and my gender rather than like hide under a suit as I am now. As far as the perspective of the humor, really like my comedy is so specific because my sense of humor is so twisted and weird and special that it feels like a Ziwe question or a Ziwe joke because there's very narrow lane that makes me laugh. Yeah.
How would you
like
describe
gushers.
that? How would you describe how would you describe that spectrum? Like, what are the bounds of it? What almost makes you laugh but doesn't make you laugh, sort of on this side or on that side, if that image is helpful for you for defining your comedy?
I can't even think of physical bounds. I think there's a level of hyperbole that comes with what I find really funny. It doesn't feel real. That's also my work. So a lot of the time when people are looking at my interviews, they're like, "Oh my gosh, was this scripted?" Like, no, I didn't script. Like this congressman named George Santos didn't know who James Baldwin was, even though he was the first out gay Republican. No, I didn't script that. But it feels like it feels unreal. That is where I like to live, in that verite space.
Cool.
Yeah.
Couple other shows you've been a part of, iconic shows. Two of my favorite shows, Succession and The Bachelor.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Bachelor Nation and Succession.
Succession, first of all, how did you come to be on an episode of Succession?
Will Tracy, who is an Onion writer, I have been stalking him, and I really wanted to write on the show, and that didn't work out, but I auditioned randomly. I got an audition in my email box to be this character that was like a Sam B type, and I auditioned and I got the role, and Jesse Armstrong called me and was like, "Hey, we want to rewrite the character so it's more like your show." And I was happy that he called me and he knew my name, and so then they rewrote it, and that's how that came to be.
Do you think that show, it's done now, did it have something important to say about America, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, that show is such an insight into wealth and the ways in which our world is controlled by like 6 rich people. It's so wild. I wish I could have been born into one of those families. That would have been nice. But it's never too late to marry into them. But I love that show. Like I go hard for that show because it's so human, but they have such impact on the world, and it's all about the quirky like idiosyncrasies of like siblings fighting over who's in charge of the empire, who is daddy's favorite, you know.
And reality TV. I know you have thoughts.
I love reality TV.
What do you think that reflects back to us about our society?
Misogyny, racism. Reality TV is a curse upon the earth. To be clear, but I love it. I breathe it. I watch it as like a sociologist. I can like quote episodes of Housewives, and I rewatch episodes. I'm so dedicated because it is a time capsule of like America post-recession, you know? Like you really understand, especially Real Housewives, you really understand this like post-2008 grifter. That is, there's a character that like defrauds old people. There's another character that like commits tax fraud. All of them are getting arrested at all times. And it is so specific to like how America is like over-policed and hyper-criminalized, but also that people are like putting on airs to appear fancy, just for social pressures. So I find reality TV to be both like a cancer, but also like a beautiful cell that is fat and multiplying. And it's all about perspective.
Very difficult to diagnose. Yeah.
And I famously, did you guys know that I was interviewed to be a Real Housewife? Isn't that wild? I would be horrible because I'm secretive and I don't want to go to jail. But I like to imagine a world where I could exist in that space and fight with people on camera for $6. It would never happen, but I like to use the editing tropes that they use in Real Housewives of Salt Lake City when I edit like a George Santos or like a Rosebud and Roy Wood Jr. interview clip. Like I think that they deploy really, really effective news, honestly. Yeah.
What would your character be like?
What would my Real Housewife character be like? Oh, she would never appear on TV. Could you imagine? Could you imagine me arguing? I would be so bad. I'd be like, are you mad at me? I'm a Pisces. Like, don't eek. I would not be good at reality TV at all.
So these talks...
I'd be like, do you guys see the camera's right there? Like, behave, you know?
These talks are about identity.
Yes.
And one dimension of identity is generational cohort.
Yes.
How much do you identify with your generational cohort, and in what ways?
With Gen Alpha? I would say a lot. I would say I identify with Gen Alpha a lot, although I vote like a millennial. No, I mean, what does that even mean? That's millions and millions of people. Do I watch? We all came up. You know what's interesting about my particular generation is that we are like the last generation before the internet fully took over. So I remember having a Windows 95 Packard Bell, the family computer. You'd go in the little room, you know, someone call, you get booted off the internet with a little dial-up. Like I remember the AOL man. So it's like what I really appreciate from growing up in that time period, which was not too far ago, is that I have a real understanding of sources and having a natural distrust for the internet. And so when you, like, AI, obviously, like, you use ChatGPT and it makes things up. It makes things up, but sometimes people view it as the gospel. But because I grew up in that pre-space, I have a love for periodicals and books that really makes me sort of skeptical of what's viral, because that's the way we were raised before X redacted year.
What about the opportunity to put your voice into the world through the internet? That's kind of your generation and forward.
Totally. I mean,
yeah, like how much is that sort of a defining feature of your identity as an artist, as a person, is having access to the internet in order to share your voice? You don't have to be on one of 3 or 4 broadcast networks.
100%. I mean, so the internet is a blessing and it's a curse. The curse is that it sort of, you know, spread misinformation that led to the propagation of authoritarian regimes. But The blessing is that it has broken down barriers that would traditionally gate people like me from entering creative spaces and making money as a professional, right? And so there is a lot of good to be had in the internet. We just have to figure out how do we root out the cancer that is killing us from the core. But it is essential. My work, you cannot divorce my work from the internet, nor does my work exist without the internet. Obviously, there's a lot of roots from like Fox News is like a big influence. Shout out to Murdoch, legend, like gang legend. Like seriously, my work takes so much from the outrage machine and the clickbaiting and the quote machine of like cutting someone totally out of context and then using that to create views. That is the fundamentals of my work, right? Like, and my work critiques that. It shows like, oh, this is actually an insane way that we've shifted news to be all about ratings and nothing to do with actually communicating facts effectively. Like it's all opinion based. So that does exist without the internet, but obviously the internet scales it to the billions. And you see that with my work, right? With a clip like, hey, Rosebud Baker, can you, like, what is your race and what is your gender? That is such an asinine, trite question that has millions and millions of engagement and views on it because of the outrage machine around identity politics that are used to divide us instead of bringing us together. Well, I'm spilling.
Yeah, you're going off. You know, to me, the natural follow-up is, do you have a sense of what could be done to repair it?
I'm a Luddite, so I'm like, abolish the internet. I don't care if we all lose a job. Like, bring me back to the 90s when it was safe, even though it wasn't necessarily. I do not have a solution. I think that my job as an entertainer is to continue to undermine the rhetorical tools used to propagate misinformation, right? To show like, oh, this outrage machine is so silly. Please look in plain sight how it revs people up using nothing, using absolutely nothing. So I think that that's part of my journey with my work, but we're all approaching the issue of authoritarian rule at different entry points. And hopefully it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, and we can make a difference together by doing little tiny things.
Going back to your book for a second, there's some hilarious stuff in there. There's some really poignant stuff as well. You talk about, also in terms of your identity, perfectionism, imposter syndrome. And I love the way that you resolve that for yourself. You landed on some beautiful words. You said, I don't want to get this wrong. You said, the only way I could be an imposter is if I'm not true to myself. And I think a lot of people, there was some whistles, there was some, people could benefit from having a phrase like that up on their walls. So I'm curious if there's any, practically speaking, if there's any practices that help you stay grounded in your sort of intention to be yourself and be true to yourself, because you do so many different things, and I'm sure you're pulled in a lot of different directions. Just practically speaking, what do you do to stay in line with that?
That's a great question. There are multiple ways to answer it, but I think I'll start with, when you're growing up as a child, the advice that you always get is be yourself. And when I was a child, I thought, this is the stupidest advice. Like, give me something good. Like, what stock should I have bought? But it is the truest advice. Be yourself. Like, you know who you are. You know what you like. You know what you're attracted to. You know what you're drawn to. And so for my work, I have tried to be other people, and I've flopped at every turn. And whenever I try to follow a path that someone else has created, I feel a derivative that is 19 steps behind. But when I remember what I like, what makes me laugh, what I am drawn to, I am able to be the best because I'm one of one. I am an original. I am the best at being Ziwe. And that is something that I follow to sort of get along the lines of like, I'm only an imposter if I don't stay true to myself. I flop when I am trying to be anyone but myself. So that's how I follow those rules, because I've seen it time and time again, me take L after L after L. If you're asking how do I make that a daily practice, I literally spend a lot of time with myself and I ask myself those same questions. What do you like? What are you interested in? What makes you laugh? Is this interesting to you? What do you actually like? And that helps me find the right guests, helps me finish a book, helps me follow the animations I want to do, or whatever path I choose to follow. It just helps me center. But you know who you are. And as we grow, we find ourselves more. But yourself is with you every day. Your oldest friend.
That's great.
We clap for ourselves. Give it up for yourselves.
No, it is really great, and that's why I love that idea that you put out there in the straight about the university course, because I think it's true, it's good advice, not just for artists, but for anybody.
Of course.
You know, when you're really sort of deeply motivated in your work, one story I always tell is Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the phone. I might be getting this wrong, I hope I'm not, but his mom was deaf. And that's part of why he had this interest in sound and in communication. It's like love. It's like deeply who he was. And so anyways, I think it applies well outside the bounds of artists as well. Like just.
I agree. I was kind of a lazy student. Sorry that I started that, is because I don't want to say I was a lazy student, but I had laziness in me. And I remember the classes I excelled in were the classes where I felt really passionate about. So poetry, I really excelled at poetry. Or African American studies, I loved it because I was like, oh, I see myself in these characters. And it wasn't that I couldn't read the curriculum of other classes. It's that I could find myself committed to doing these things and researching these things without any concern for time and how long it took. And so I really challenge you to find what activates you in the world. Like, what is your obsession? Because you have one, and it might be corny and weird, but start there, and you'll find a path that is so compelling and makes a really rich life.
Okay, I want to make sure there's time for audience questions. There's tons of audience questions, so I'm going to wrap up with just a couple more here. It's been a tough year in America. We've been discussing that. It's been a tough year, but it's been a tough year in Canada too. Tariff wars, Drake, right? It's tough, okay? What message of hope do you have for us, for our Canadian audience?
Our sisters to the north.
Our sisters.
Know that I stand with you. And if anyone is a single, know that I am also single. And we can do a swap of some sort, but we are going to get through this together. And as the country with the second biggest landmass to Russia, I believe.
That's right.
Y'all have a lot of land and a lot to offer. Don't let anyone bully you. You matter and you are beautiful.
That's what we needed. That's what we needed.
Oh, Canada. Do you believe in love after love? Was that helpful? I don't know. What do you want from me?
That's a mix we'd never heard those two mashed up together. Thank you for that.
And that's a shame. Michael Bublé is also from Canada.
That's right.
Burnaby. Is that how you say that? Yeah.
Yeah. Lastly, you're going on tour this year.
Yes.
How does it feel to be going on tour in this moment?
I've seen so much of the country. You know what's exciting? I did a show in Florida, in Miami, for the first time ever. I've never been to Florida. I'm from Massachusetts. And it was a sold-out show, and the organizers at the end pulled me aside, and they said, we've never had a crowd like this before. It gives us hope. And not to say that I'm a hero, but what I really appreciate about doing shows around the country is it connects people who otherwise would not maybe personally interact with a community. So look around. I am just a vessel for you guys to organize and create and engage with each other. But I'm so fortunate that you came to hear me talk, but mostly I'm here because you inspire me.
Yeah, live spaces are so hopeful.
I love live spaces because it reminds you that the power of the people. Like, it really does. I know it sounds cliche, but you are here. We will never create this moment again in history. Like, we hold this moment and we'll never sit in the same arrangement. We'll never wear the same clothes. We'll never cough or rub our faces in the same way. And it's like, this is history. Together.
Round of applause, please, for Ziwe before your questions. Okay, first question on Slido, which feels a little bit like a dig at me. What's one question you wish people had the nerve to ask you?
What's one question I wish people had the nerve to ask me?
This question is from famed grandpa, which I like. Yeah.
I don't know if I could answer that question at all because nothing comes to mind. I hate answering questions. I know it's surprising, but I hate talking. I'm a listener.
You don't like answering questions?
No, I prefer to listen. I think that's one of my strengths. But I like to receive information, then share information. If only because like I was raised by really private immigrant parents, so I'm sort of socialized to just like zip my lips, and observe. So that is compelling, I guess. I'm an introverted person. I'm an introvert. I like long walks on the beach. Like that's worth sharing if you care.
Yeah. Rwandan culture is very private too.
I don't know what you want to hear. Yeah, Africans are like, don't share your business. We fled a war. And so I am a listener, and that's what you see in my work is that the best moments are me just absorbing what I'm receiving from my guest.
Okay, another person asked, who's been your favorite person to interview and why was it George Santos?
He's an icon, he's a star. He did text me recently. I can't pick a favorite guest. Picking a favorite guest is like picking a favorite child. We all have one, but you never say it out loud. Not a lot of parents in the crowd?
I was thinking of my favorite, yeah. If you had to do a PhD, what would your dissertation be about?
I wanted to go to grad school before I went on this path of being an entertainer/clown. I wanted to get a JD PhD and become a civil rights lawyer. But it was a lot of reading, so I don't think I could hang like that. But I would definitely get back into African American studies and then find a way to actually like use it to help people rather than to personally enrich myself. And there's nothing wrong with that as a black woman. What are you clapping for?
What advice do you have for an aspiring diva wanting to interview icons?
What advice do I have for an aspiring... I started interviewing with my friends, and they're on YouTube, and they were flops. They would get 200 views, but it would be like Aparna Nancherla, Gary Richardson, who else? Jackie Jennings. And so I would say just start with the people right next to you, and you will find bigger and bigger icons as you grow and refine your skill set. But I actually don't believe like the biggest, most famous guest is the best guest. I think the best guest is the guest with a really strong perspective. They're sticky.
A related question here was, what do you do with tough interviews when the guest isn't very giving?
So an example of that is Aparna Nancherla, who's this amazing comedian who is not racist at all, which made things very difficult. And so she allowed me to create the genre that I use now, which is like the soundbite genre of taking people woefully out of context and then weaponizing their words against them that they did not say. In that experience, I just sat in the edit and like got to my deviltry and figured it out. But it helped me, it awakened the beast of like, oh, this has a lot to do with Fox News and that machine. Like, you don't actually need the person to be, to speak in bad faith if you act in bad faith. And as someone who walks by faith, I made it happen.
Okay, this is a favorite question of many Canadians. So what is your perception of Canada as an American?
Canada is a beautiful place. I watched the Olympics documentary on Netflix with Steve Nash, your boy. So I tour a lot in Toronto, and so I've had lovely experiences. It's really beautiful and scenic, and there's not a lot of litter, at least none that I've seen in the places that they've put me up. What if I doxed myself? That would be funny. Canada's nice, and I feel bad that you're getting cyberbullied, but I got your back. If we need to hide in the woods, I know that there's a lot of forest that's been untapped. So, do you guys have ticks here? Oh, dang. I was hoping you would say no. I'm afraid of Lyme disease.
Yeah. It's good, healthy, rational fear.
Canada is beautiful. You seem to have a lot of issues as well with around, you have a lot of similar issues to the United States, but again, we're going to get through this. And if we don't, we'll be dead, so what will it matter?
Somebody asked if you would want to interview Beyonce.
I love Beyonce. I had the privilege of meeting her. It would be an honor. It would be an honor. Are you kidding? She is so gracious.
From a comedic standpoint, how would you approach that? I feel like she's guarded, like most celebrities are. She knows how to stay on script and on message.
I interviewed Simone Sanders in an Instagram Live, and she was the press secretary for Joe Biden, I believe. And what was really nice about that interview is that even though she felt sort of committed to her script, in that falsity, there was truth, right? So whenever she pivoted to a talking point, you could feel that her turn the wheels of the car. And I found that to be really interesting because you saw the mechanics of her work as this press secretary. So I can't speak to what that interview would be like, but it would be an honor. I love her. She works really hard. That's what I find the most compelling about Beyonce.
Wild work ethic.
She works really hard. Yeah. So I hope that I'm committed to my work. You guys don't realize it takes a lot of time to interview these guests and research them. I'm interviewing a guest on Sunday. I won't say who because I don't want them to flake in case this leaks. But and so I'm wearing a hat and a little mask and I'm planning the wardrobe and I'm writing the questions and I'm working through what we're going to talk about, and they're not American, so we're working through that. And so there's a lot of love that goes into creating the art that I hope you feel on the other side. Mm-hmm. So I have respect for all artists that bleed out for their work.
Mm-hmm. With her, I always notice too, she sets these standards for herself that then she has to either meet or exceed every time. It's just amazing.
Yeah, we love Beyonce.
Yeah.
And she's American.
Yeah.
But you guys have... You guys have Steve Nash on SGA. He is so sweet.
And a lot of comedy icons as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Justin Bieber.
Funny.
I feel funny. That song. Stream Yummy.
Someone's asking here, what do you think was the most significant moment in pop culture last year?
Significant moment in pop culture last year? Drake and Kendrick, obviously. To me, that was a watershed moment. It sort of shifted pop. It ended up on the stage of the Super Bowl. It is corporatized rap beef. It is such a late stage capitalism, evolution of rap from the 80s to now. It is mainstream. Yeah.
How has your view of being American changed over the last 5 years? Also, will you sign my book?
I would love to. I'm happy to sign all books. I'm proud to be an American where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men that died and gave that right to me. So I'll stand up next to you and thank you very much. Because I'm proud to be an American. My view hasn't changed. Honestly, my view of being an American changed when I was in college and when I was interning at Colbert. I remember I was so idealistic and I saw the world through rose-colored glasses, and I never thought there was a world in which a man could chase a teenage boy holding a Snapple in his pocket down a street and murder him, and it would be totally fine. I never thought that would be possible. And then I never thought that people would go online and type and defend him. So when that happened, I was in college, and it broke my heart, broke my brain, and changed me fundamentally to my core. And then if you're thinking about my work, the first baited interview I ever shot was the day after Trump won the presidency in 2016. So Hillary lost on Tuesday. I shot the first episode on a Wednesday. And again, it was one of those like fundamentally shifting moments in time where I understood that the world that I had thought of hope and change and progress was a world that we'd have to fight to get. But the arc of history bends towards justice. How long it'll bend, who is to say? But we are hoping and praying it's in our lifetime.
So I'm noticing we're all laughing at that, which is something.
What's so funny?
But do you believe that?
Do I believe? I have to have hope, or I cannot get out of bed. And so I am operating under the assumption that we will work together to change the world and make it a better place for all. And if not, I'll jump into that bay. But I believe, I really do.
It's interesting hearing you talk here and also with the class. Like, you're obviously hilarious, off the cuff, extemporaneously, but you also have this grounding in history. And one thing I think about this moment that we're in is how part of the problem is we've become quite ahistorical as a society. Do you have thoughts on that? Do you have an opinion on that? I know you studied African American history. You have a strong sense of history. It comes out in little ways out the side, you know?
Yes, of course. Open the schools. I'm deeply concerned with the ways in which we've divorced, even what's going on in the last year. You can really open a history book and point, and you'll see how we've gotten to this point. I think that is important. You see that in my work. It is so motivated by history, and so I hope, yes, we are ahistorical, but I am a history lover, and I hope that we can bring some history to the mainstream.
Love that. Okay, someone is asking...
History. What?
Someone is asking, how much do your guests go in knowing before you interview them?
They all know what, again, people think I hog-tie these people. No, they all know what the game is. The only person that didn't know was Fran Lebowitz because she doesn't have a computer. And so, no, seriously. So my talent producer had to go to her house with a laptop and show her different videos. And Fran Lebowitz watched them and was like, okay, I'll do this, but I won't do any games. And then she showed up to interview and she was like, I have to leave in 10 minutes because I have to hang out with Martin Scorsese. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And then she ended up staying for 2 hours because we were getting along swimmingly. So as far as, so we had a great time. But they all have an idea of what is going to happen because I believe in consent and I believe in having a strong, I believe that it's like a two-person creation. I really don't think I am this mastermind that's working through what I'm going to use this vessel for. I think that it is something that we create in the room.
And there's a level of trust.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah. Great.
Only one person has been mad at me. I'm not going to say. They're very powerful.
Are you ever worried about, on that note, are you ever worried about being canceled? How do you approach political correctness, comedy, and being authentic?
I would love to be canceled. Oh, be canceled so I can have 4 houses in Texas and a hit podcast? Oh, no. Are you kidding? That sounds awesome. So I can star in a movie? Canceled? No, cancellation doesn't exist. It's not real. Cancel me. I dare you. I wish you would. So I can sell more copies of my book? Please cancel me. Oh, you're gonna burn my book in protest? Oh no. Like, everybody's talking about me. The horror. Someone addicted to attention. I would be so lucky.
Has your interview approach changed as TikTok and short-form content is on the rise?
No, because I was doing that work before TikTok existed. If you check the Carfax, you look at my interviews from 2016, my interviews were longer. They were 7 minutes long, but you could cut them down and they still do numbers on TikTok today. So the clips that I did that have like 200 views on YouTube when I first released them, I literally cut them down and they have 10 million views on TikTok. So I have always been the standard bearer for media and the internet. I am a pathfinder.
Do you ever worry, though, about concision in comedy and in art? Is there a point where you feel like this is actually too short to tell a new story or to communicate a new idea?
It is always too short to tell any story. I think that's the commentary on the clickbait in the Fox News genre, is that they take something, they make it into a 30-second clip, and they use it to spin people out to be hateful. So you do need the context of a larger interview to understand what is being said, what is the context here before I get all riled up. And so what's interesting, at least with my clips, is that they make people step back and say, where is this coming from? And hopefully watch the full interview. But the clips themselves are too short. How do you communicate a thesis in 30 seconds? It's unbelievable. How do you communicate a thesis in 200 characters? It's unbelievable. And we now live in this world where everything is truncated. And what has it done to our brains?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So your show is actually interrogating that very problem of concision.
Of course.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty cool.
Yeah. If you could interview any iconic girl boss scammer, who would it be?
Elizabeth Holmes. One drop of blood, one drop of blood. I'm obsessed with Elizabeth Holmes. My ex-boyfriend worked with her, and he said that she'd always talk really low, and she had a lower voice than him. And I'm obsessed with that. The fact that her low voice got her billions of dollars from really horny board of directors. That is wild. I'm obsessed with her. She's in jail with Jen Shaw of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And I think that they should free our girls.
Okay, as a It's
okay, you don't have to think I'm normal. I know.
And this is in all caps, young person.
Yes.
That's in all caps. How do you want to see mentors, educators, community organizations supporting young BIPOC trying to make their way?
How do I want to see them support these people? Ooh. Leading by example, not gatekeeping. I think the best mentorship that I have gotten coming up is people, one, giving me work, and then two, putting me on game. So showing me how the machinations of my very complicated industry work so that I cannot get screwed over. And so those are really simple ways that you can look out for the people alongside of you, the people below you, even the people above you. But just be honesty, transparency, that is important.
I love this question because I didn't get to touch on this. How was working with Desus and Mero?
Oh yeah, you guys know who Desus and Mero is. I love that. Yes, that's throwback. They were really big idols of mine because I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and they're the Bronx comedy sort of mirrors what Lawrence's vibe. And I just found them to be so exciting and bombastic, and they really expanded my mind around like what can have a really wide audience, right? So if I came out of the like Onion Chicago world, it like reminds me that, oh yeah, like the Bronx is on the map. It is a cultural like touchstone in America and North America. And that was really, really helpful to my work, is reminding me that, oh, I don't have to hide certain parts of my personality to be accessible to all.
Could you break down those different regional comedic voices? You touched Chicago, the Bronx, and where you grew up in Massachusetts. How would you define those differences?
How would I define those differences? That's a great question. My experience in Chicago was did the improv industrial complex, and so it was a lot. It was really Midwestern, which is like a little. It's met a lot of guys named John. That's how I would describe Chicago. Massachusetts is hateful. Go Pats. Very argumentative. And then the Bronx I just found to be just have like so many like chopped cheese sandwiches and like bodega cats and just like all of these really minute details that were still really relatable, I found to be special. But that's not a really accurate way to describe those regions. It's more just my experience in those regions.
Have you ever had to turn someone away for an interview?
Yeah.
And how come?
Because they weren't sticky, they weren't fuego. The best people to interview are those with really strong perspectives, with something to say. And because of society, some people they've been beaten so much that they have nothing to say, or they don't know what they have to say. And so those are the guests that I avoid, because I don't think it's valuable for anyone, not for the guest, not for me, and certainly not for the audience. But yeah, I've turned down some stars. What? Yeah.
Has Ziwe the show shaped your identity as an American in any way?
My identity as an American shaped that show. Yeah, it's like such an American show, if only because it's like a woman like scantily clad bossing people around, only in America. So yeah, I would say that my experiences, I bled into that show to make it something that I think is really, really interesting and captivating.
Someone is asking, they're saying, first of all, they go hard for Succession.
Oh, I love Succession.
And
I love that show.
They're asking, which sibling was your favorite?
Shiv. Obviously. I'm not a misogynist. I think that Shiv should have got the keys to the castle, but obviously, her dad hates women, and also she had a lot of hubris, so she didn't want to do the legwork of learning how to work at a media company. But obviously, these are fictional characters, so this doesn't matter. But Shiv.
Do you have a favorite Nigerian saying or clapback?
Nawao, which means trouble. Say it with me. Nawao. Wow, this is faded.
This is a real quick one. What breed of dog is Celine Dion?
He's a chow chow. He's a chow chow that's underweight, tiny Anna. No, he's like the runt of the litter, and no one wanted him.
No one wanted Celine?
No one wanted Celine Dion, but he's a king, and he doesn't have debt, so he's technically richer than I am. Any dog owners? That's my Ray Romano pivot. My dog has no debt. Ibida.
In what way do you think comedy serves as political critique? And in that vein, how does that sort of satire, maybe this is a finer point on the question. How does that sort of satire contribute to political action, if at all?
I don't know if comedy... I don't know how to answer that question. I think comedy allows us to like eat our medicine. So it's like at least in political comedy's sake, something that is really hard to digest. You don't want to listen to the news at all. You want to put your fingers in your ears. It's easier to absorb it because you're able to have a little levity that makes it palatable. I don't know if comedy replaces political action. We still want y'all in the grassroots, with your protest signs, but it's certainly a tool to communicate.
Mm-hmm. And along those lines, who has shaped your political perspective? Any comedians in that bunch, or is it more other sorts of thinkers?
My political perspective is shaped by Ida B. Wells, who created the first database for lynchings in America, which she was just like a masterful record keeper. She was a journalist. She is sort of the foundation and an inspiration for me because she was really committed to data. Great. Yeah, how random, I know. I really like Ida B. Wells. Who else? Yeah. I think Toni Morrison is a big impact, but that's not a political figure. She's just a really compelling writer. But it's political.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's shaped your political perspective, yeah. Mm. Those are some couple good picks.
Colbert, of course, Stephen Colbert, for sure. I mean, I used to watch, I remember I was in my high school, freshman year of high school, my teacher introduced us to A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, where he talks about eating babies. And it is this no, he's not actually. So he basically, his point, she looked at me like I was loca. So basically, his point is that the Irish are so abused and disenfranchised that we might as well use their babies and eat them because we're already taking all their nutrients. And so his point satirically was that they deserve to be treated as humans. And then, so we read that essay, and then we watched the Colbert Report, and I understood the power of words, and that you can use it to say something really impactful and really acute and astute about the world in which we live. And so that obviously, you see those fingerprints all over my work. I do not advocate for eating children.
You talked about the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman being a pivotal moment for you. Someone here is asking about the 2024 election. Yeah. And if that was equally a surprise for you or you expected those results.
I wouldn't say I expected those results, but how can you be surprised? I feel nothing. I am but a hollow shell inside. So no, I wouldn't say, I kind of took the information. I was alone in Nashville on a shoot, just alone in a large hotel, and I took that information in, and I woke up the next day, and you get to work and you continue because that's the only thing I can do.
This is a big question, perhaps too big, but what moment has had the biggest impact on your life?
Birth? I would say birth has had the single biggest impact on my life.
Huge day for sure.
Standing by that, yeah. If I wasn't born, none of this would happen. Or it would be a different timeline. But I would say, what's the biggest impact on your life?
Hey, birth is great. I'm going to go with birth too.
Maybe one day I'll be like, oh, the birth of my little Ziwe Jr., but I don't, my dog, I don't know.
Okay, the song Stop Being Poor.
Yes.
What does it mean to you during this time of oligarchy?
Oh, gosh. What does stop being poor? It means stream, like, and subscribe. I cannot believe our timeline. Honestly, it's wild. Yeah, Stop Being Poor is a song in which I tell people that if you may not have health, you guys have healthcare in Canada, but in America you will find yourself not having healthcare, and the solution to that is to just not find yourself doing that. And it's a satirical song about how you can will yourself out of poverty. And I'm turning to it for inspiration in these times because, now that they've canceled Black History Month, I'm working towards my goals of paying my mortgage.
Beyond just not wanting to be poor, what motivates you? Well, you have a tremendous work ethic and a range of things that you do. You know, what drives that?
What drives my work ethic? Nigerians, having immigrant parents that have instilled in me that if I am a failure, I'm a curse to our family name. But besides that, what drives my work ethic? I am obsessed. To be you have to be obsessed at whatever it is that you commit to. And so watching like the George Santos interview, I watched that interview before we released it, maybe 50 times. Like I could quote it. I like cut to cut, number to number. So it's a compulsion. I cannot help myself. I get into the edit and I lose myself and I lose sense of time. So my work ethic comes from me finding the thing that I naturally am attracted to and like, and then going headfirst into it and not coming up for error until it's finished, and then I do the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one.
That's making me think of something that's not exactly a question, but like my working definition of talent is the ability to see details and care about details in a given thing.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what you're describing. Like when it comes down to your work and your voice and what you find funny, there's just a level of detail that you see and are interested in getting deeper into.
Definitely. I think that I watch my work so many times that an audience member could watch my work 4 times and get 4 different lessons from it. Like you watch what I say, then you watch what the guest says, then you watch like why did the edit cut in that way? Why did they use that particular reaction shot? Yeah, so there's an obsession to it because again, obviously the soundbite era of journalism that we are in has truncated our work, so it's 30 seconds and it lives and it dies. But I prefer to create a full narrative over the course of an interview because I think that thoroughness helps it to last more than just the news cycle of a week or a day in this case. It used to be a week under the Bush era. In Trump era, it's like 45 minutes.
What's weird to me is that while that is absolutely the case, like that's the prevailing thing, also so many people will listen to a 3-hour podcast. Do you understand that?
I do that when I clean my house.
Okay.
Yeah, I listen to housewife podcasts.
Nice. You mentioned a lot earlier going into this internship when you were still at Northwestern because Childish Gambino, Donald Glover did it.
Yeah.
Who are your other comedy heroes?
Colbert is a comedy hero. Tina Fey. I love Tina Fey. She can write, man. I met her for the first time like a week ago, and she was so kind and so gracious. I think she's one of my favorite writers. Steve Martin has a really, really inspirational autobiography called Born Standing Up that I recommend if you're ever interested in entering the arts and you're afraid of failure. He talks about how he hit a brick wall until he didn't. So I recommend his work. Who else? Yeah, there's so many great talents. Issa Rae is another inspiration of mine for sure. I love Issa. Io is fantastic. I came up in New York City with her as a working comedian. But there are so many different people who I just get so much inspiration from. Okay, I think we're just about at our last question. I'm sorry, there's so many great questions here. We don't have time to get to them all, but I found one here in my scrolling that seems like the perfect way to end. Okay. If you were president, as your 6-year-old self wished to become, yes, what would you do? What executive orders would you pass? So mine are wild. Mine are so plain because I'm like free healthcare. I'm like free housing, free education, free. That's what I do.
Your 6-year-old self?
Yeah.
Great.
As my 6-year-old self?
Yeah, that's as your now self.
As my 6-year-old self, I'd be like free candy. So probably, but I don't think I ever wrapped my head around going into debt over like basic necessities. So a 6-year-old me would also be like, that's whack as hell. You're running up your credit card to pay for like a doctor's appointment. But you guys don't have that problem here. What are your problems? You don't have litter, but you do have ticks. Okay.
That was great. Thank you so much.
I'm kidding. I know you guys have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But I'm in your house.
Yeah. And you have a dog named Celine Dion. Like, we're going to love you forever.
Oh,
You'll realize
thank you.
that. Like,
I love Vancouver. I'm happy to come here on a work visa. Feel free to invite me.
Thanks so much. Round of applause for Ziwe, please.